I have to admit, I am not the type of person who will see a movie or TV show just because a certain person have worked on it, such as a director, writer, or animator. This is because I don't want it to be disappointed if the film or show ends up being terrible or easily branding them. However, there is one director slash producer out there that I will make an exception, which is none other than Don Bluth. For those who don't know who he is, Don Bluth was once an animator for Disney before he left to make his own movies. His films from the 80s received a lot of praise, even to this day. However, when the 90s came around, his movies that came out at the time weren't that great or memorable. It wasn't until the late 90s when he started to get some praise when he released Anastasia. Unfortunately, his next film, Tyne A.E., received mixed reviews. By this video, he had directed one short, 10 movies, 3 video games, and 1 direct-to-video. Some of you may be wondering why I'm making a big fuss over this guy, since I don't make a big deal with any other directors in my other reviews. Well, I could say it's because of nostalgia and everyone should at least watch one of his movies, but there are 2 reasons. 1, it's been almost 20 years since he last directed a movie, and 2, in late 2015, Don Bluth has started a Kickstarter, then an Indiegogo campaign to make a movie based on one of his video games, Dragon's Lair, or rather, a movie pitch. Now, I would donate some money to it if my finances were so tight at the moment, so I decided to review one of his movies to bring awareness to it. So, let's dive right in. Now, The Secret of NIMH was based on the book Mrs. Frisby and the Rats and NIMH by Robert C. O'Brien, and it was the first film that Don Bluth had directed. If you expect me to compare the book to the film, I won't since I haven't read the book. However, there are some other reviewers out there who specialize in that type of review, like these YouTubers. The movie begins with some narration. Although his name isn't said here, we do see our narrator write his name. It isn't until later where it is confirmed that his name is Nicodemus. He states that it's been 4 years since they left a place called NIMH, and someone named Jonathan Brisby had just died while helping with some kind of plan. Also, he's worried about Jonathan's wife since she doesn't know anything about the plan or them. Although the scene is only about 2 minutes long, it's 2 minutes done well to draw the viewer in. It makes you want to know more about what Nicodemus has said, like the plan and NIMH. Also, I like how he's shown here. For the most part, we only see a little bit of him, and we don't see his face until we see his reflection on the red stone. It makes him mysterious. After that mysterious intro, we see Jonathan's wife, Mrs. Brisby, visiting Mr. Aegis, a fellow mouse. She tells him that her son Timothy is ill. At first, Mr. Aegis believes that Timothy was sick because of a spider bite before Mrs. Brisby lists some symptoms. He then states that Timothy has pneumonia and gives her some medicine. He also warns her that her son must stay inside for at least 3 weeks. Although she is grateful for the medicine, Mrs. Brisby is still worried since it's almost moving day. Although it may be just me, but I can't help but chuckle when Mr. Aegis thought Timothy had a spider bite at first. I can't help but wonder if Timothy has a bad habit of getting bitten by spiders. On her way home, Mrs. Brisby comes across a crow named Jeremy, who's tangled in some string. As she tries to help untangle him, the 2 nearly escape the farmer's cat. That night, we're introduced to Mrs. Brisby's 3 other kids, Teresa, Cynthia, and Martin. Their neighbor Auntie Shrew comes over and wants to talk to their mom. However, the kids inform her that their mom had gone to Mr. Aegis to get some medicine for Timothy. Martin then starts being rude to Auntie Shrew. Due to his attitude, she starts to leave when Mrs. Brisby returns. She tells the widow that moving day is going to happen at any minute. I'm sure I'm not the only one here who wants to smack Martin for his behavior, but a small part of me believes he's behaving like this because he's still grieving over his dad's death and is worried about his little brother. Oh, fun fact, the actor who plays Martin is Will Wheaton. Star Trek fans may recognize him as Wesley Crusher from Star Trek The Next Generation. That would explain why I want to tell Martin to shut up. The next day, Mrs. Brisby discovers that the farmer has started plowing early. With Auntie Shrew's help, they manage to stop the tractor. Knowing that it's only a temporary solution, Mrs. Frisbee has Jeremy take her to the Great Owl for help. The Great Owl at first tells her that there's nothing he can do. However, after learning her name, he tells her to visit a group of rats who live beneath the rosebush on the farm and ask for Nicodemus. Taking the owl's words to heart, she goes to the rosebush. As she makes her way underground, she encounters Mr. H's and Justin, the captain of the guard. Once the three enters a meeting hall, we see a fellow rat, Jenner, arguing with the other rats to stay and forget about the plan. After the rats learn who Miss Frisbee is, they agree to move her home. She then finally meets Nicodemus, who explains how the rats know about her husband. Apparently, Jonathan, along with the rats and Mr. H's, were part of a series of experiments at a place known as NIHM, also known as the National Institute of Mental Health. The experiments caused their lifespans to extend, as well as increase their intelligence, which helped them escape. The rats then came up with a plan where they will leave the farm and live independently without stealing from the humans. Nicodemus then gives Mrs. Frisbee the amulet that we saw at the beginning. He tells her that it gives magical powers to its wearer whenever they're brave. As they make their way out of the rats' underground lair, Justin mentions that they need to drug the farmer's cat so they can move Mrs. Frisbee's house, as well as so the rats can leave the farm safely. Even though she was hesitant at first, Mrs. Frisbee volunteers. That night, she puts the drug into the cat's food dish, but the farmer's son catches her as she tries to escape. While at cage, she overhears the farmer talking to someone from NIHM over the phone and learns that the institute is coming the next day. She managed to escape from her cage and runs off to warn the rats. We then see the rats trying to move the Frisbee home by using a rope and pulley system. Jenner sabotages the ropes, causing the assembly to fall apart, which kills Nicodemus. Mrs. Frisbee arrives and tries to convince the rats that NIHM is coming and they must leave. However, Jenner calls her a liar and attacks her. Justin rushes in to save Mrs. Frisbee and wins the fight. He then addresses the other rats to prepare for their leave from the farm. The Frisbee home then begins to sink into the mud, which the rats are unable to move it. With the power of the amulet, Mrs. Frisbee is able to lift it out of the mud and move it to a safe place. The movie ends with Timothy getting better and the rats had left the farm. So that was The Secret of NIHM. And I'm going to say, it's a good movie. The story is simple but enjoyable, and the animation is great for being over 30 years old. Everything is beautiful to look at, and the backgrounds are very detailed. I won't be surprised if that's what some people remember the most. The characters, in my opinion, don't feel out of place. There's Mr. H's, who's a cranky old mouse. Justin, who's a nice guy and has a hero vibe to him. Nicodemus, who's like a wise old sage, and Jeremy, who's clumsy but friendly. Speaking of Jeremy, he can be annoying, and I can see some people not liking him because of this. But I think that's the point, since the other characters do find him annoying, but it's kind of funny watching them interact with him. Then there's Mrs. Frisbee, a timid little thing who cares about her kids. Now that I think about it, we never learn about her first name. Throughout this film, the characters either called her Mrs. Frisbee or Mrs. Jonathan Frisbee. I would understand for some characters, like the rats, who would call her that out of politeness. But I found it a little weird with some characters who are closer to her don't call her by her first name. Then again, it's a tiny nitpick, and I'm sure someone turned this into some kind of counting game. As for the voice acting, each actor did a great job. But I do have one problem, and that's with the late Elizabeth Hartman, who voiced Mrs. Frisbee. Don't get me wrong, she did a good job, but there were moments where she didn't provide the right emotion. For example, there is a moment where Mrs. Frisbee is on Jeremy's back as they fly to the Great Owl. While she looks terrified during that moment, she didn't sound terrified. If I wasn't watching the screen at the moment, I wouldn't have known that she was scared just by her voice alone. Despite all that, I give The Secret of NIHM 5 out of 5 stars.